Good day, students. Welcome to Jack 1, Understanding the Self. And for this day, we are going to continue what we have discussed last meeting. So now let's proceed to lesson 3, which is the self from the anthropological perspectives. So at the end of this discussion, you are going to explain how culture affects or shapes one's identity and explain your sense of self through the different I positions and the three fundamental selves. And lastly is you're going to reflect on your own identity struggles by writing an essay. So being a Filipino, it belongs to the country Philippines and to its people and culture. And in the context of citizenship, Filipino simply means membership in a nation or a state, which is the Philippines. And in the Constitution, a citizen is someone who legally resides in a country. So if you are a foreign in a country, and you want to be a citizen in that certain country, so you need to process all the documents that is required in the Constitution. But according to anthropologists, it is different because if you are a member of a certain group, then meaning to say you have the same culture, you have the same traditions, you have the same norms, beliefs, and etc. that you've learned from it coming from your descendants. Okay, so to identify the cultural and national identity of oneself, first we need to define what is culture. So culture is derived from the Latin word culture or cultus, meaning care or cultivation, and it is analogous to caring for an infant. Diba, like the idea of an infant and a mother, so the infant needs to be cared by her mother in order for him or her to live. And then just like the culture, so the culture need to be to care from our ascendants to be pass it o to the descendants. So kailangan iatiman og maayo sa mga ascendants or ilang ginaatiman og maayo ang ilahang culture kay para ilahang mapasa sa ilahang mga umaabot nga mga henerasyon. And for the identity, it refers to who the person is or who the qualities and traits of an individual that make him or her different from others. Like for example, we Filipino people are identified as a religious people. So cultural identity refers to the identity of feeling of belongingness to a certain culture group, and it is an individual's perception about himself or herself anchored on race, gender, nationality, religion, ethnicity, and language. So in the Philippines, we have different culture because we belong to different group of people. Like for example, the Maranao, the Tausug, the Hiligaynon, the Ilocano, and many more. So that is the reason why a certain person acts and behaves the way he or she does. It makes sense of how an individual is influenced by the cultural context or he or she is situated in. So a nation is a group of people built on the premise of shared customs, traditions, religion, language, art, history, and more. So meaning to say, it is a large body of people united by common descents, history, culture, or language inhabiting a particular country or territory. So national identity refers to the identity or feeling of belongingness to one state or nation. So according to Rupert Emerson, it defines as a body of people who feel that they are a nation. So national identity is kung asa ka gikan, asa ka gigapuyo, asa ka gigikanan. So mo na ang national identity. So according to this theory, there are two cultural identity. The first is the material culture and then the non-material culture. So the material culture refers to the nation or the national flag, emblem or seal, and those representing all the people who are part of a nation. So these are the tangible things that we see by our five senses. And also, kani nga mga butang is mo ni ang nagpamatuod nga mo na ang kultura sa isa ka lugar. Like for example in the Philippines. So, di ba naatay mga barong Tagalog, mga Malong, mga barong Atsaya, and then napuntay mga gipang tawag og kanang mga larong Pinoy. So, these are the kulturang Pinoy nga makita nato, and then mao pud ni sila ang naka-identify nato nga we are Filipinos. And for the non-material culture, this refers to the embodies the shared understanding of a group of people, which includes norms, beliefs, and traditions. So these are the non-tangible things that we observe in a certain group of people or in a nation. Like for example, in the Philippines, most of us are Roman Catholics. And from that, we observe that most of the Filipinos are practices those beliefs. So for the national identity, it requires the process of self-categorization. Like for example, if you want to be a citizen in that country, to be identified as a national identity, then you need to process all the requirements or all the documents needed. So one of most identifying himself or herself with an in-group and differentiate himself or herself from the out-groups. So according to Brian Morris, the self is not an identity but a process that orchestrates an individual's personal experiences, because we came from different places and we have different experiences. So as a result, a person becomes self-aware and self-reflecting about his or her place in the surrounding world. So Brian Morris stated that the most crucial form of interactions and exchange takes place neither between the individual and society, nor between the psyche and culture, but instead between the self and his or her cultural environment as mediated by social practices. So according to Hubert Hermans, the self daw as the society of the mind. He posited the idea that the self is considered as extended to significant others in the environment that populate the self as a dynamic multiplicity or of I positions in which the dialogical or monological relationship may emerge. So it depends on the self kung asa siya nabilong or asa siya nabutang. And then kung unsa ang iyang na-experience within that certain place, then mao gyud daw na ang iyang culture, ang iyang tradition, ang iyang mga norms and beliefs na na-learn coming from that place. So in this theory, an individual sense of self is established. How once identify himself or herself with the different positions he or she holds, internally or externally to himself or herself. An internal I position refers to how one functions in himself or herself, while an external I position refers to one how identifies himself or herself based on particular external factors. So we have here the different type of the self. The individual self, the relational self, and the collective self. So for the individual self, it reflects the conditions related to traits, states and behaviors that are stored in our memory. So, like for example, we have the ideal self and the real self. So, kaning real self is kanang kung unsa ka karon, kung unsa ang nasa imong karon, and then the ideal self is kung unsa ang imong ginahuna, ideally kung unsa imong gusto sa imong kaugalingon, and then that affects our self-esteem. So for the relational self, it reflects conditions that are related to one's relations. So maybe it could be your relationship to your mother, your relationship to your parents, your relationship to your brothers, to your sisters, or to your siblings, or it could be your relationship to your loved ones or to your significant others. And for the collective selves, it reflects conditions that are related to one's group or the society that you are in or the community that you belong. And this can affect you because of your experiences towards them. Identity struggles is an individual can be asympathetic because of particular individual issues, but people sometimes fail to consider any justification for why one can be asympathetic, and this is called identity struggles. It is because we compare ourselves, we compare our culture, we compare our norms, our traditions, and beliefs from the certain group of people, and this makes ourselves low self-esteem. So this term was introduced by Anthony Wallace and Raymond Fungelson. So this term was introduced by Anthony Wallace and Raymond Fungelson. So the discrepancy between the identity a person claims to possess, the identity attributed to the person by others. So that's all for our discussion. So thank you for your listening.